Breadcrumbing. It's essentially the act of stringing someone along without any intention of committing. Now, it's a very simple concept, but there are a few things we really need to discuss. For one, there are different types of breadcrumbing that you may encounter. There are different types of people who may use this tactic, and there are different reasons why they might use it. But one of the most interesting conversations we can have about this is why it works. So we're going to talk about all of that, and I'm going to leave you with some tips on how to deal with this manipulative tactic in your own life. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Common Ego community. My name is Christina, and on this channel we talk about emotional abuse, spirituality, and self-development. Today we're talking about breadcrumbing. And like I said in the intro, it is kind of a simple concept, and it has a simple definition: stringing someone along. But there are a lot of layers to this topic that we're going to uncover in today's video. And we're going to start with different types of breadcrumbing. And you may have experienced one or all of these in your life. So the first one we're going to start with has two subcategories. And so this is breadcrumbing in a relationship. And I want to talk about it in two different ways, because even though there is some overlap in the behaviors that you'll see, there's more to talk about in the different stages. So in the first stage of a relationship, when you notice breadcrumbing, that's what we're going to talk about first. This is early on. So what we're talking about here is past that point where it's just flirting and to the point where you're starting to talk about a relationship. Maybe the person that you're with has even promised a relationship or alluded to the fact that you're in a relationship. But the difference here is that there's going to be a lot of confusion. There are going to be a lot of mixed messages. And it's going to feel at times like you're being gaslighted about this relationship in general. When you're in front of this person's face, they're going to be all about you and all about the relationship. They may even talk about future plans. And then out of nowhere, they may just go MIA. They may ghost you. So even when you text them or you call them, you reach out, they don't respond for a stretch of time. We're not talking about just a day. We're talking about a good stretch of time. And then they show up again like nothing happened. And of course, you're going to ask them for a reason, and they're going to give you some lame excuse and try to gloss over it. Someone who is breadcrumbing you at this stage is highly likely to only make last-minute plans with you. Or they'll make plans with you further in advance and then cancel them on the day of or right before you're supposed to do the thing. And on top of all of this, kind of like the cherry on top, this person will continue sending you flirtatious texts, complimenting you and not committing to anything at all. And it's going to leave you confused. None of it really makes sense. It doesn't add up. You kind of feel like you're on an emotional roller coaster with this person, and you're trying to make heads or tails of how they feel about you. But here's the thing. If somebody cares about you, if somebody cares about continuing a relationship with you, they're going to be clear about their intentions. They're not going to lead you to believe that they have strong feelings for you when they actually don't. Relationships should consist of two consenting adults, not one adult who's trying to mislead another. That's straight up manipulation, and it's not okay. All right, so what kind of person does this? Is it always a narcissist? And my answer to that is it's not necessarily always somebody who has NPD, but the act itself is highly narcissistic. Because at best case scenario, they know that you feel stronger about them than they feel about you, and they're leading you on. They may do this because they like the attention, or they may do this because they just want a backup. So if they need somebody to go out with, they have you. So with all that said, yes, it is something that is highly narcissistic to do, and it's something that narcissists are very comfortable doing. In fact, narcissists will often use breadcrumbing to keep people as their backup or fallback. Narcissists often use breadcrumbing when they have a primary source of supply already and they're looking for that backup plan. And to be clear, it's not always just one backup plan. They may have multiple backups ready. Okay, so the next phase of this is later on in the relationship with a narcissist. And this is after you've been in a long-term relationship with a narcissist and you've already been through the idealization and the devaluation, and you may have even been through a discard. At this point, the narcissist is either starting to look for other sources of supply and trying to keep you on the hook until they find another source, or maybe they've already done that. Maybe they've already gone to the new supply and they've already gone through the devaluation and the discard there, and they're coming back around again to hoover. These are both scenarios where a narcissist who you've been in a relationship with for a long time may start breadcrumbing out of nowhere. It's very much that push-pull, the back and forth, where you feel like you don't know which end is up and you don't know who the real person is. You don't know which version of this person to trust. But at this stage, you know that you want to hang on to those little morsels that this person is leaving out for you. These little breadcrumbs that they're leaving. You want to cling to them and hope that they're going to become more frequent and that things will go back to the way they once were. But what's going on behind the scenes here is it's just a narcissist being a narcissist. They are treating you like an object. Think of it this way. Somebody owns a guitar and they used to play it all the time and they felt like it brought them joy, but it just kind of fell out of favor. This happens with stuff, right? So they put it down, but every once in a while they pick it up, maybe dust it off, maybe check the strings, see if it needs to be restrung, and then they put it back down. They want to make sure the guitar is ready for that moment when they might want to pick it up and play. Unfortunately, this is not very far off from how narcissists view people, like objects. And those little things they do as upkeep, maybe dusting it off, maybe tuning it here and there, it's kind of like what they're doing with their breadcrumbing. They're just putting those feelers out. And here's the thing, breadcrumbing is kind of almost like testing too. When they send those little feelers out, they want to know how you respond. If you respond favorably, they can rest assured that they still have you on the hook. And that whenever they're ready, if they decide that they're going to be ready at any point, they can go and pick you up off the shelf. Okay, so we talked about breadcrumbing in two phases of a relationship with somebody who's highly narcissistic, if not somebody with NPD. Now, I want to point out that a relationship with a narcissist does not often begin with breadcrumbing, because when somebody is breadcrumbing in the beginning, they're not serious about a relationship. Also, a relationship with a narcissist usually starts with some form of idealization or love bombing. Okay, so the second type of breadcrumbing you may experience in your life is from a friend. Now, I have separated this one out from the romantic relationship because it's really different, because our expectations of friends are different. And I think there may be some friends who unintentionally do this. So, you know, that person who's always saying, oh yeah, we've got to make plans. Oh, we've got to do something one day. And like years go by and you never end up hanging out with this person. Sometimes I think people just say things like that to feel a connection with somebody, to make it seem like you're connected. And they don't necessarily mean it to be manipulative. And then there are those friends who intentionally will string you along so they have somebody to vent to when nobody else is going to pick up the phone, or they have somebody to call to go out with when no one else is available. So these people are going to only call you when they want something. They probably won't pick up the phone when you really need somebody to talk to. They'll invite you out last minute, and they're very likely to cancel plans on you at the last minute all the time. In a friendship especially, you might notice that this friend who's breadcrumbing you will not invite you to hang out with a group. So really, more than just a list of behaviors, what you're going to notice is a feeling. And it's the feeling that this person is using you, that they're using you as a stand-in friend. They are absolutely not prioritizing your friendship, but they're expecting you to. So the last type of breadcrumbing that I want to talk about happens at work. And this is usually a boss who is dangling a promotion or a raise in front of you. And they'll do this to get you, to motivate you to work harder, to put in more hours, more overtime, maybe even unpaid overtime, and to avoid taking vacation days or sick days. Now, this is a narcissistic leader. This is not a good leader. And while, yes, these things, promotions and raises, are motivation for us to work harder and to do a better job and sometimes to put in overtime. But the clear difference when your boss is breadcrumbing you is that the promotion or the raise or whatever it is that they're promising you never comes. And we're going to talk about how to handle this and the other types of breadcrumbing at the end of this video. But for now, I want to talk about something that I find incredibly interesting, and that is why breadcrumbing works. So to get a better handle on this, I looked at some of the available research, and there are actually studies done on why playing hard to get works. And that's kind of a similar thing. Somebody who's breadcrumbing you is making you feel like you have to work harder for their attention and their affection. So one study looked at the behavior of people who use online dating sites. And for this study, researchers planted insiders, which we can kind of look at like actors in this scenario. And so these insiders created profiles and they made themselves seem more selective to the dating pool. And what researchers found was that participants ultimately found the more selective dating profiles to be more attractive. The second study I think is even more interesting. So this used a face-to-face conversation between the insiders and the participants. And during this conversation, they asked both groups a question or a series of questions. The questions had to do with their relationship preferences. So here's an example. One of the questions was, to what extent do you prefer to cuddle with your partner when sleeping? Now, the insiders always gave the opposite answer to the participants. And then they were all set into two groups. Group one was instructed to try to find common ground with the insiders. They were instructed to resolve the disagreements, and they used a fixed script to allow themselves to be convinced of the other's perspective. So the second group was instructed to hold firm, to stand firm in their position, and to not allow themselves to be convinced of the insider's perspective. So which group of participants do you think found the insiders more attractive? It was the first group. And the only difference, the only thing that changed, was the amount of effort that the participants were asked to put in. So these participants encountered the insiders who were unwavering in their opinions. They didn't seem to want to find a common ground, but the participants were instructed to do so, to find that common ground, to allow themselves to be convinced. And as a result, they found the insiders more attractive. Personally, I wonder how much empathy played a role in this, because when we're forced to be empathetic, to show empathy to another person, it creates more of a human connection. But nonetheless, in this group, the participants were the only ones trying to bridge that gap. They were the only ones making an effort. So it seems that when we have to invest time, energy, and effort into something, that it becomes more valuable. And on some level, that makes sense. But when it comes to dealing with manipulative people, it can be dangerous. And I want to talk about another study that seems unrelated, but just bear with me. So in this study, researchers sat participants down in a room with a bunch of wine bottles. And the wine bottles had different price tags. But just because they had different price tags doesn't mean that they were different wine. For example, there was a $90 bottle of wine that was labeled as $90. A different bottle containing the same wine was also labeled $10. Now, which do you think participants found to taste better? No surprise, they came to the conclusion that the $90 bottle tasted better. And to take things even further, here's where it starts to really get interesting. Researchers were using brain imaging while the participants were drinking these small amounts of wine to see what was going on in their brain. When the participants drank the $90 bottle of wine, an area of the brain associated with pleasure lit up. And that's not so surprising, especially since the participants said that they enjoyed that wine. But what is a little bit surprising is that when they tasted the same wine, the same exact wine that was labeled at $10, not only did they say they didn't enjoy it as much, But the brain scan showed as much too. So they weren't just saying, oh, I like the $90 bottle so that they could look like wine snobs. They really, really enjoyed the more expensive bottle purely because it had a higher price tag. When that same wine was $10, they just didn't like it as much. So maybe it's true that we are conditioned to think that things that cost more, time, energy, effort, money, are more valuable. But if we could condition ourselves to believe that the $10 bottle was the more valuable one, we'd save $80. And if we could believe that constant affection and appreciation was more valuable, we might have better relationships. We never really want to be in that situation where we're making somebody else a priority in our lives and we're just an option to them. We're just the guitar that's sitting on the shelf. We're looking at them like they're the $90 bottle of wine and they're looking at us like we're the $10 bottle. We never really want to be in that position. So I want to leave you with some tips on how to handle these various types of breadcrumbing that you may find in your life. So the first step, no matter what type of breadcrumbing that you are facing, is to talk about it. There's always a chance that it's a miscommunication. There's always a chance that there's something here that you're missing. Maybe it's the person's situation. There's something going on there that you don't know about. And they can fill you in and let you know that they actually do care more than it seems in the moment. Just proceed with caution and follow your gut. Make sure you believe that story before you invest any more of your time and effort. Okay, so the second tip I have for you is going to apply for most of those new romantic relationships. And it's going to be to seriously consider cutting this person out of your life. Consider if you want this type of behavior in your life. Now, if you've already talked to the person about it, if you've already told them what bothers you and what you expect out of them in a relationship, and you're expecting a relationship, yet nothing has changed, their behavior stays the same. You're still getting that feeling like they're breadcrumbing you, and that's because they probably are. So at this point, you have to consider if that's something you want or not, because it's not likely to change. The next tip I have is to try to change the relationship. Now, again, if you've already talked to them about it and they're not going to change their behavior, the only thing you can do is change your own behavior. Stand your ground. If previously you would jump every time they called you to hang out, maybe take a step back on being so eager. If you have something else to do, do it. It's okay to say no to this person. And if they back off, if they stop calling you, it's an indication that they didn't really want or deserve this place in your life to begin with. Another thing you can do is live your best life. Make an effort to surround yourself with people who prioritize your friendship, who respect your time, and start doing things that you really enjoy. Maybe start making some time commitments, maybe taking classes or something, so you don't always have that free time when that person comes calling. So that even if you wanted to hang out with them, you have other plans. And the best part about this is that you're naturally sending that message that you don't have time for this person's nonsense, because you don't have time for this person's nonsense. You're too busy living your best life. And sending the message that you're selective with your time too. Okay, so what if the breadcrumbing is happening at work? Now this is a little bit different. So if you feel like you're being breadcrumbed at work, now, of course, you're not going to have a conversation with your boss and say, hey, I feel like you're breadcrumbing me. You're stringing me along and nothing is going to happen. That's probably not the way you want to speak to your boss, right? But you can have a serious conversation about your future at the company. And this may be something that you've had before, but ask your boss to put any promises that they're making in writing. So if they say, if you do this, you'll get a raise. Say, would you be able to put that in writing? If they don't put it in writing, it's not a good sign, but it's not necessarily the end of the world. You can take control and you can start documenting your successes, your accomplishments at this job. And for bonus points, try to quantify those accomplishments with a dollar value, so that when it comes time for your next review, you can say, I saved this company X amount of dollars with this decision, with this overtime that I did, with this extra work I did on this project to make it a success. Whatever it is, try to quantify it with a dollar amount to the company. So it becomes difficult for them to argue your value. And the best part about this strategy is that if it doesn't work, you can take those accomplishments, especially if you have a dollar amount attached to it, if you have a true value attached to it, you can take those accomplishments and can use them on your resume and maybe get a job where your boss appreciates you. So those are all the tips I have for you, and I hope you found some value in this video. If you did, please do let me know by hitting that like button and comment your thoughts below. I love reading the comments, even if I don't always get to respond to all of them. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.